I've decided is that I'm going to go ahead and do a podcast as well. Right? I mean, we've been talking about it.
I halfway feel like I'm stealing your thunder.
And I feel like I want to bring back the World Safest podcast, but make it like Mach 2. I don't want it to be like
2.0.
I don't want it to be like season 2. I want it to be different.
2.0 is your reboot.
So I tell you what. Since you surprised me by putting me on your podcast, Dennis Miller. See, that's a little slip of the tongue. Sorry.
Oh, right.
Dennis Mitchell, another guy that I know. Since you surprised me by putting me on your podcast, I didn't even realize that that's what we were doing. I'm going to make you the first guest of my podcast. Okay? Are you ready for that?
Cool. Yes.
All right. And so, guess what? We're doing it right now. Is that exciting?
I should have looked more carefully that you were holding the device.
All right, so all you have to do is just plug in that microphone, and let's get to work.
2, 3, 4, 5 sibilants. 2, 3. Checking.
That sounds good. It sounds like we're in business, actually. And so, welcome to your podcast. So let's find some royalty-free big band, maybe some marching band music that we can slip in here, and then the marching band can come through here, and they can all file through here because we're celebrating the initial broadcast of this podcast, finally up and running. Okay, you guys have a nice day. All right, thank you guys. We'll just take care of all that in post. All right.
Get somebody doing happy birthday to you, and you'll be okay.
That's royalty free these days. So I'm sure there's something online. I'll find it.
I'll tell you a story about the music that I had to use and the ordeal you go through. You better be careful.
Well, I don't want to get in trouble, and so the first thing I want to do with this podcast is get in trouble. That's probably the second thing I'm going to do. But we're here right now with a veteran of the radio wars and Beatlemaniac extraordinaire, Dennis Mitchell. And he's agreed to be my first guest on what hopefully will be a somewhat interesting podcast. I don't really know what it's going to be all about.
Well,
and actually, that's one of the things that I think the podcast is going to be all about, is that I'm hoping that it will kind of organically form itself, and we can discuss what exactly it is that we're going to do, and maybe the audience can chime in and tell me what they'd like me to do, and we can see what happens.
You're releasing a wild spore into the atmosphere and hoping that it will find its proper place.
Well, exactly. So let's back up. Let's back up a little bit here, and kind of let everybody know where we're at now and where we're going in the future, or where we think we might be going in the future. You've been on me for a little while to sort of bring my podcast back, because I was doing a podcast before. Now, I want you to tell me a little bit about what you have in your mind for this radio station that you're putting together. You're putting a lot of work into it, and you sort of exited the environs of broadcast media, and you're moving into this sort of electronic thing, and you're putting together this radio station, and you're doing it here in Carpinteria.
Yeah.
And so tell me kind of what your focus is going to be, and what can we expect out of this thing?
Information.
Yeah.
Good information.
Okay.
My whole motivation for wanting to do a radio station for Carpinteria, and we're starting online because that's economically the best way to go.
Sure.
And they're not issuing licenses for new radio stations at the moment anyway. But our long-term goal is to get there. my motivation for doing it was I moved here 6 years ago, lived in Santa Barbara for 5 of those years, and just moved here relatively recently. But in doing the news on a Santa Barbara radio station and then running a Santa Barbara radio station, it occurred to me that Carpinteria kind of gets short shrift in terms of coverage of its events. Anything big happens here, you'll see it in Newshawk. You might see it on Channel 3.
Sure.
And maybe even the Ventura media outlets will cover it. But it's residual. It's like fallout from those markets. I just see Carpinteria as being so compelling and interesting and having enough issues of its own that it should have its own little radio station to get to those issues first. And then Santa Barbara and Ventura stuff can be down on the list here, in proportion with how what people's priorities here really are. So it was basically to give Carpinteria more of a voice. The station is going to be largely talk programming, good information. The idea, the goal, is to get as much of that to be locally oriented as possible. We're starting with a few really good, strong local programs. One by me, one with the publishers of Cannabis by the Sea magazine. We have Alex Robles coming on with local programming, and our DOS is going to do Grateful Grooves. The station will not be a music radio station, but there will be music on it. It'll be the music of California through and through. Now, like I said, it's primarily talk. A lot of the programmings will deal with the issues here. There will be programs for gardening. There will be programs for ocean preservation, programs for wine connoisseurs. There's a cooking show. We're trying to cover all the bases of the stuff that people are interested in here.
Right.
And anytime a program runs a little short and doesn't fill up a whole hour, you're going to get the music of California, and that means the Beach Boys, and that means the Grateful Dead, and that means the Mamas and the Papas, the whole shot.
Right. Okay.
And some of it more contemporary as well. There's a couple of little Red Hot Chili Peppers tunes that are pretty good, and they're the Sweethearts of L.A.
Sure.
So anyway, that's the focus. The focus is Carpinteria. California is the environment.
Well, okay, and so, as you say, there aren't any real media outlets here in Carpinteria.
We have Coastal View News, which is very good.
Which we have, but we're sort of a satellite market of Santa Barbara and Ventura, and you hear a lot about those communities, but then you don't hear a lot about Carpinteria, and so. I think it's a really admirable thing to have an outlet for information that the people of Carpinteria can use. And that's certainly something that I have tried to do with my little Facebook thingy, as whatever limited it is. But I've got this little Facebook group, World's Safest Beach, and that's what we do there is we talk about things that relate to Carpinteria, and specifically about Carpinteria. And certainly it's an outlet for a lot of people to post their very cool sunset photos and that sort of thing. So we have a really great crew, but I'm trying to focus on specifically Carpinteria because you don't get that news elsewhere. Mm-hmm. You get Ventura, you get Santa Barbara. And to kind of bring everybody on board who doesn't already know, one of the things that I was doing pre-pandemic was I thought I would do a little podcast just for fun. And so I rolled this little thing out, and it's probably here on this YouTube channel, so you've probably already seen it. It's the Carpinteria, the World's Safest Podcast, which is kind of an adjunct to the Facebook group, World's Safest Beach. And we talked about things specifically about Carpinteria, and we talked to people who had things to do with what was happening in Carpinteria, and it was, interesting. I had just come off the radio for a long period of time, and I was kind of experimenting a little bit with just doing whatever the hell I wanted to do.
I was very entertained by it.
Well, it's one of those things where I just lowered the bar all the way down to the ground because I just decided nobody cares what I sound like or what I say I like that, so I'm just going to I don't care if the microphones crackle and all of a sudden it doesn't work right, and who cares? And if I was on the radio, I'd be pulling my hair out and freaking out. But who cares?
No, it had a very organic feel to it. And if I could back up just a little bit, your World's Safest Beach Facebook feed is my go-to.
Yeah.
I was following that and very closely and intently long before I came up with the radio station idea. And, like I said, you've been a touchstone of information, very valuable to me. And this is why when I started to formulate the plan for the radio station, you're the first person I approached in terms of what I need to know and what's important and how we should do this.
Well, sure. And the Facebook group is fun because it's got so many local people that are participating in it, which is really exciting to me, because I don't want to have a website or a Facebook group that's just me and what I'm saying, and that would be boring. So we have a lot of participation of the community, and that's really, really good. And I'm hoping now. See, here's what I'm But with the World Safest podcast, I didn't really know what I was doing as far as I didn't really have a goal for it, and I just was it was just a lark to do. And to kind of back everybody up who doesn't know the story already, the guy Amboy, who's a great guy I was doing the show with, I didn't really know him. He was we have a mutual friend, and this mutual friend of ours said, hey, I know this guy who called me up, Peter DeGray, and he called me up on the phone. And he said, hey, I know this guy. He wants to do a podcast. He wants to do it about Carpinteria. And I thought of you because I know that you're a radio guy. And I thought, well, I've been thinking about doing a podcast, but I've been off the radio for a while. And so I decided to go ahead and meet Amboy. And then we just turned our meeting into the first episode of our podcast.
That, to your credit, it sounds like you guys knew each other very well. We really did.
We talked for about 5 minutes on the phone.
Wow.
When we arranged the meeting that we ultimately had there at the now closed Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and it was sort of an experiment on. I kind of wanted to have a transparent view of the creation of a podcast, but also it was just really. I just decided to be as unprofessional as I possibly could be, because I have had it with trying to be professional. I spent 25 years trying to be a professional radio guy, and that got me exactly nowhere. So, you know what? Fuck them. So Amboy and I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But boy, I tell you what, man, I needed a producer because I really had a hard time scheduling guests, people to commit to doing the podcast and that sort of thing. So I just decided to give it up. And unfortunately, the last episode of the podcast was going to be an episode on the Palms.
Yes, you told me that.
And Todd, one of the owners of the Palms, had agreed to meet me, and I was going to meet with a waiter that has worked there for 25 years or whatever, and interview people who worked there for a long time, and I wound up screwing up the dates, and so I wound up blowing Todd off. I got my dates confused, and I just decided, you know what? And I've been thinking about ending the podcast anyway, so I just decided, fuck it.
Yeah.
I'm done.
What a lot of people might not realize, even as they listen to us now, is when you commit to doing a podcast, you're a self-contained unit.
Well,
you are the Al Franken SNL character with the satellite dish on his head. You got to do it all yourself, including scheduling.
Right, exactly. It pretty much works out to be a crew of one. But so I just decided I wasn't going to do it, and we just left it the way it was, and it was fun. But I just left it the way it was. But I've been thinking maybe I'll bring it back. So you're putting together this radio station, Dennis,
of which your original podcast is a part. We'll be running the past episodes because they're so good.
there's some
They are fun.
They're better than silence, but so I've known you, and you say, hey, listen, I've been doing this thing, and I'm doing this online thing, and it's all about carpinteria, and you're a carpinteria guy, and what do you think about doing this podcast again? And I said, well, I've been sitting on it for a long time, admittedly, I know. And so finally I just decided with the new year, with 2022, I've decided for the first time in my life, I made a New Year's resolution. I've never made a New Year's resolution before. Mm-hmm. I don't believe in them. I don't. If you want to resolve to do something, then you just resolve to do it, and you don't wait for some artificial New Year's.
Mine has only ever been to make it to the next one.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then if you don't, so what?
But this last year, I decided to make a New Year's resolution, which was just simply to do something. I don't know what.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I don't know what it's going to be, but fucking A, I'm going to do something.
Good.
And
I finally wore you down.
Yeah, and I'm going to have some fun doing it. So I just decided, you know what, the podcast would be fun. I'm sitting on all this stuff, and it's just ready to go. And then you decided that you were going to do podcasts too, and so you sort of snuck the podcast on me. I didn't realize that was what we were doing, was that we were going to do a podcast. So I just thought I was going to come up, and we're going to just hang out and we're going to, just BS about Beatles or whatever we're going to do. And then, you get the microphone set up, and I thought, okay, we're going to check the microphones and everything and say, just go and sit over there, and, I'm all ready to go, check 1, 2, 3. And then all of a sudden, you're doing the podcast. And, one thing that I don't want to say it was disturbing, but it was a little. I had to sit a while and think about how I thought about this. One thing that you surprised me with is that you decided to reveal my identity as the weird old overnight guy at the Motel 6.
I didn't know it was a secret.
That's not something that I've talked about on social media at all. Oh. And, I've talked about like going to work, but I don't talk about the I don't talk about that. I don't, because here's the deal, and here's where the transparency comes in, because I should be in therapy, but I'm not. So guess what? I'm probably going to wind up using this podcast as a way to purge myself of all these things that I'm thinking of.
Well, that'll be interesting. I mean, and I didn't mean to trick you. I thought I was up front with all the podcast stuff.
Part of what I'm going through is that I spent 25 years on the radio, and what people think is a pretty cool thing. I mean, the reality, and you realize, you know this, Dennis, is that it's a job. It's just like any other job, and it's not really any cooler than any other job. But people think that it's cooler, and they think that you're pretty fucking cool for doing it.
Yeah.
And so I decided to, maybe about 5 years or so, I decided to walk away from the whole radio thing. And since then, I've been kind of going through a whole series of things. I mean, I tried television, that didn't work out. And I tried, PR. So I've been kind of bouncing around for the last 5 years, just trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up, And so rather than trying to, extend the media career that I had spent, more than a quarter decade putting together, I just decided to just fuck it, and so I spent some time as I was a dog trainer for Petco, and that was fun.
Yeah.
Working in the Petco store was not much fun, so I didn't do that for very long. But I've done all kinds of stuff, and so here I am at the Motel 6. And it's just a low-rate job. It's an entry-level job. I'm an old man, and here I am working. I'm the weird old guy that's working at the Motel 6. But you know what? And from a purely, objective perspective as a job, it's not a very good one. Come on. I mean,
No,
I
yeah.
might as well be working at McDonald's or
on paper, no.
whatever else. It's just whatever shitty job that there is, you know.
Yeah.
But you know what? I dig this job because it's the first job. First of all, I'm in a holding pattern, and I know I'm in a holding pattern.
Mm-hmm.
I'm holding out for, I don't know what's going to come my way, but something's going to drop in my lap. I'm going to meet somebody. I'm going to go somewhere. I'm going to do something, and it's just going to wind up being the right thing at the right time, like all the other really good things that have happened in my life. So until that happens, I need to, pay the mortgage somehow, and so
Right.
I might as well have a job that doesn't stress me out. And so the overnight gig at the Motel 6, I'm sorry, dude, it's just a chill gig. I mean, I got to check a few people in, and the people who check in at 2 o'clock in the morning are way cooler than the people who check in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I just got to make coffee at 6 o'clock in the morning. I got to print out some paperwork at like 4.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And so I have no responsibility.
Yeah.
And because I have no responsibility, I have no stress.
Right. Well, one of the toughest things, though, is just the nature of being an overnight person. I've worked overnights.
Oh, God.
Most of us have had some experience
Yeah.
doing that. And for me, that experience is you never get used to it. It's kind of not natural thing. It's for a certain set of people.
Yeah.
And if I may, what you'd said about radio, in the end, it's a job. You have a time card and you get a paycheck.
Oh, but
and
it's
so
way
many hours a
cooler,
day.
though.
But it's for a certain set of
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
And not anybody can just walk in and do
No.
that job.
And really, I mean, I used to hearken my career in radio like a case of herpes. You couldn't cure it, but you could treat it. You could treat it, but
Never
you can't.
heard that analogy.
Yeah, but you can't actually cure it, so it never really goes away.
No, it doesn't. That I can attest to.
And so I don't. I mean, so that's one of the things that I'm hoping to maybe get out of this podcast is just a little bit of that fun, whatever.
Yeah. It never leaves you.
Because it is. I mean, it's a great gig, but at the same time, it's a job. And
sadly, it's a job on the level that it's hard to find a situation where you're truly appreciated and truly treated like you should be, paid like you should be. If that was the case all along, we'd still have careers like we used to have.
That's true.
Instead of the deterioration of the industry,
of course,
which is like all other jobs, where people just aren't getting paid what they're worth.
Well, and to go off on the radio tangent, which I will probably do from time to time because I have a lot to think about it. The state of radio is pretty bad, and it has been really bad for a really long time. And it's two basic things as far as I'm concerned. It's radio deregulation and consolidation, and the technology, the computer technology that allows you to automate and program things with a computer that you used to have a person in the studio for. When the people left radio, it became disembodied voices in the computer.
Voices from who knows where.
Yeah, and even if it was somebody who was there in your town, we were doing what we call voice tracking. Mm-hmm. It still lacked a certain something. Because I can tell you, when I was a disc jockey, I mean, that was where I started my career as a disc jockey, and I moved into news and that sort of thing later on. But when I was a disc jockey, you had to sit in the studio and listen to the records that you played,
right,
while you played them,
and they were records,
exactly. And you'd sit and you'd listen to them, and of course you're doing other stuff. You're doing meter readings, right, or whatever you had to do,
right, checking the log.
But mostly you're just sitting around listening to the music. Mostly you're talking to whoever calls on the phone, and so it kind of puts you in the same place as your audience, and you're thinking about the lyrics of the song that you're playing, and you're thinking about how it relates to maybe the last song that you played, or you're thinking about how it relates to your day, or how it relates to the news of the day, or whatever.
And then people call and tell you what it means to them.
Exactly. And so it becomes more of an interactive thing, whereas, okay, we all know Stairway to Heaven. We've all heard Stairway to Heaven 1,000 times. And so we can say, hey, there's Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. And that's about all you have to say about that. But if you're listening to the lyrics of Stairway to Heaven, and all of a sudden you're thinking about them, and they take you somewhere, then all of a sudden then you got a story that relates to the song Stairway to Heaven, or the band Led Zeppelin, or whatever, and you got something to talk about instead of what I kindly refer to as liner monkeys. I've always called them that. They're just they're just robots that read the liner card in the studio, and that's what they do, and they have nothing else to say about anything except for what they're told to say. That's so boring. So I'd much rather have you tell me what you think about what you just played.
Yeah, and we're a dying breed, my friend. Ever since the Telecom Act of 1996, that was the old times, boys and girls. Yeah. The government rode shotgun on the whole industry and made sure that it was to serve the community, and that had to be your top priority. There were requirements for local programming and all this stuff. It's like with the Telecom Act being signed into law, that was a wholesale abandonment of that principle, because we're using this for advertising. This is an advertising medium. Advertising is first. Advertising is foremost. And if you're going to do local stuff and cover local issues, better be for the advertising. And this is where we lost the battle. I mean, it's advertising driven rather than community oriented anymore, and that's everywhere you go. And this is another thing we're trying to buck the trend with the online radio station. And if we get on the air with an LPFM or whatever it is, it'll be nonprofit, non-commercial, and we don't have to go that way. We can have our finger on the pulse of the community and have that be the priority rather than making a buck because
that's something. We probably should get close to wrapping this up because I don't know what time it is, but whatever. We're shooting for about half an hour or so. But and we'll have to maybe do part 2 at some point in time. But the thing that I want to say, though, about what it is that you want to do that I really like, because to be honest with you, I mean, radio's fun. I love radio. Radio's great. But you know what? I'm not so enamored with radio that I must be on it at all costs, kind of thing. But what I really do want to do is I want to do. I mean, I know this sounds whenever play the violins and give me a fucking medal, whatever. But I do want to do community service. I mean, I appreciate the community. I appreciate the value, and let's face it, it's Facebook. It's not, it's not like breaking news or whatever. But I do like to sort of aggregate the news that Carpinterians are interested in about Carpinteria on the Facebook group. And I like the idea of doing that with a radio station. I've always enjoyed doing small town local news, and you can say what you want to say about her.
Yeah.
But I used to work for Wendy McCaw, who owns the Santa Barbara News Press, and I worked for the radio station that she operated, and the news talk KZSB,
right,
and the News Press radio station, and that whole station, that whole entire programming of that station has no syndicated programming. None.
It's all local, really?
It's all
I
local.
do tune in from time to time.
It is all local.
Wow.
They have I don't know what they have now, but they had when I worked there, 50 people contributing their voices to the radio station. And they were talking about, all sorts of things. And they might be talking about Santa Barbara. They might not be talking about Santa Barbara, but they were in Santa Barbara. They were from Santa Barbara, and they weren't from somewhere else. And it wasn't some Rush Limbaugh, it wasn't syndicated, and it wasn't
your typical AM news station.
Exactly.
And when they lead into the news, they say news of Santa Barbara and the West.
And the West,
So
exactly.
they cover. I hear stories out of Arizona there.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing we would do. Of course, this gets to the nuts and bolts of when I was the news director there. One of the ways that we composed the newscast was that we had, the national news, which we would carry syndicated, actually 5 minutes of news at the top of the hour from BBC World Service live from London. But then the rest of the newscast was local stories, whether it be stories from the Santa Barbara News Press or other Associated Press stories that were more like local stories, what we consider the West kind of, there's the regional stories. So we talk about Arizona, we talk about what happened up in New Washington or whatever. So that's the way we constructed it. But yeah, the only syndicated programming that we had was 5 minutes of news at the top of the hour from BBC World Service live from London.
Wasn't aware of that.
And that's it. Everything else, every other show was locally produced. And so I'm really interested in doing that kind of radio again. I love doing it.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in doing something that the people of Carpinteria are going to find, entertaining and useful.
You're an integral part to what I'm doing. And when I came to K-Tide, I got my foot in the door there by doing their newscasts in the morning. And I'm the opposite of you as far as my career. I started in news, became very accomplished at it, quite frankly, and gravitated over. The devil lured me over to the rock and roll side, and it was everything. I got the gig doing news on a very funny, wickedly adult, funny morning show on an FM station in Las Vegas. And I never looked back. And then I got breakfast with the Beatles, and I've always kept my foot over in the music pool for enjoying it. But when I came to K-Tide and continued doing the newscasts, my mindset was local only. The national news, you have more than enough sources to get that news online, on TV, on radio, and I don't need to provide that for you. So let's just jump right to the stuff that we're all talking about in terms of local issues anyway. And Carpinteria Valley Radio, the radio station you referred to earlier, that's going to be our main focus. What's going on in Carpinteria? And then we'll filter out to maybe Santa Barbara, Ventura if it's something big. But we have enough big issues here, and you know what they are.
Well,
and that's our mindset.
I'm thinking, and I'm just sort of doing this. I'm feeling this as I go along. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with this podcast, but it's not going to be. One thing it's not going to be. It's not going to be the world's safest podcast. It's not going to be that. I want to talk about stuff that's happening in Carpinteria, but I might not want to talk about stuff that's happening in Carpinteria. I might want to talk about stuff that's happening in Santa Barbara. I might want to talk about stuff that's happening in Washington, D.C.
This will be the David J. podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But it's still going to be very... very Carpinteria centric,
of course.
And I mean, I do love the whole. I do love the title of the World Savers podcast.
Yeah,
so I kind of brainstormed a little bit, and I don't know. This may be stupid. This may be cool. I don't know, and I don't care. But I'm going to call it. Surf the world's safest. Surf the world's safest. I have a hard time saying that. I'm going to have to get used to saying surf the world's safest.
Okay.
I don't know why, but in my head, I keep wanting to say surf the safe one.
Okay. That's almost like a sales slogan for
surf the
something.
Safe one. Yeah, exactly. Surf the safe one. It's like, but no, I'm going to call it. Surf the world's safest. I want to kind of align with the world's safest beach, but I don't necessarily want to be only about world's safest beach. So we're surfing here, we're surfing there.
Surfing the issues.
Well, exactly. And
I like it.
You surf the internet to wherever you want to go, and you surf the world's safest, but you know what? It's like we're just going to do whatever. So maybe we'll surf over here. Maybe we'll surf over here. Maybe we'll surf on up this side. I don't really know.
It's the whole ocean.
I don't really know. And, actually have the idea for a new logo, because the old logo that we have for the World Safest podcast was basically the logo that we're using for World Safest Beach, which is an old promotional logo for Carpinteria that's kind of stylized. What we've changed it out as is this is going to be the new logo of the podcast.
I love it. That's a nice variation. No, that's very good. That's very good.
Surf the World Safest.
That's little boy you. That's little boy David on his inflatable toy surfing the World Safest.
And I figure we could get away with using the Great Wave as the background image, which is what I'm using, that very famous Japanese woodball lock print, because it was carved in 1400 or so. So I think that by now it's in the public domain. So hopefully no one's gonna sue me for using the Great Wave as my new logo for my podcast.
You do have to be careful of those things.
I know.
Another thing we're very aware of in establishing the radio station.
I've thought very carefully about this. I've kind of researched it, and I can't. It looks like no one actually owns the copyright on it. It's public domain. So
I was on a morning show. I told you that was wacky and irreverent, and actually, frankly, cruel sometimes. But they. The slogan for the show became, "It's always better to ask forgiveness than permission." Not so much anymore. You better ask permission first, or you're going to wind up,
Well, it depends on what you're asking, because nowadays, with this whole cancel culture that we're experiencing right now in modern society, sometimes there is no forgiveness.
Yeah, that's...
sometimes you just get one strike, and you're
out.
Done.
Yeah.
And
so be careful. That's what we're doing, right?
Exactly.
Asking permission, doing the opposite.
So, anyways, that's what I'm thinking about doing. It's going to be the Surf the World Safest. I'm going to talk about whatever, and I don't really know exactly what I'm going to do, but I'm thinking that the people, and if there's actually anybody who's actually in the long run actually listening to this and has actually gotten this far into the podcast, which should have a medal for that. But if you want to try to contact me, I'm big on transparency. And so in this age of, this 21st century age of not being able to find anybody or whatever, guess what? You want to call me? You can call me up. You want to write me a letter? You can write me a letter. You want to send me an email? You can send me an email. No problem. So I tell you what, kids, grab your pencils, because this is how to contact the show. You can send stuff to David J, or you can send stuff to Surf the World Safest, or you can send stuff to Shithead, whatever. I'll probably get it anyways. But you can send
occupant/shithead.
You can send your old-fashioned cards and letters to Post Office Box 41733, Santa Barbara, California 93140. It's Post Office Box 41733, Santa Barbara, California 93140. Or you can shoot me an email at gomulet@gmail.com. That's spelled GOMULET@gmail.com. The Gomulet's going to come up.
Okay.
It's going to come up.
We lay in wait.
It's going to be very interesting.
Well,
just real quick though,
okay.
but before I forget, the phone number to call is area code 805-724-4995. Once again, that's 805-724-4995. You can give me a call. Let me know what you want to hear. Maybe you want to do the podcast. Maybe you want to be a guest. Maybe you've got suggestions on a guest. Maybe you just want to tell me to fuck off. Whatever you want to do, whatever makes you feel good, reach out. Let me know what you want to hear, because if you don't let me know, then you're just going to hear what I have in mind, and God, that might be painful.
Well, reaching out is what I've been all about since starting to develop this radio station idea. You are going to be an integral part of it, whether you like it or not. Your broadcasting and your carpinteria. You are those two things, and I need those two things. We, as a team on the radio station, need those things. So I'm happy that you're taking another foray into podcasting. And basically, I'm only doing a podcast to create content for the radio station, Carpinteria Valley Radio, coming soon. By the time you hear this, it might even be on the air. And podcasts just kind of morph into broadcasting content. That's another positive outgrowth of the fractionalization of radio, of everything scattering and becoming so different and a little less rewarding for those of us veterans. So we just strive to find a way to make it fun. Podcasting is fun. So if we can take fun podcasts and make a fun radio station out of it, why don't we do that?
Exactly. So, this has all been very fun for me so far, and we'll see. The fun is just yet to begin. I guess we're going to try to make it like a real radio show, even though we're not on actual radio.
No, and like I say, my podcast is Something to Carp About, which you came up with the title
for,
and I made no secret of the fact I wanted to steal that from you, and you were gracious enough to give it to me voluntarily. Certainly. And you were my first guest, and it was very well received. And we're going to have many conversations like this, my friend.
Well, it should be a lot of fun, and I'm actually looking forward to more conversations because you and I actually have a lot to discuss. There's no doubt about it. So I'm going to come up with some other guests to talk about. And, in the meantime, like I said, we're going to try to make it like a real radio show. So in the future, we may, like pause for breaks, and there might be some public service announcements or some comedy or something weird happening during the breaks. And let's probably we need a little theme song, I think. Probably hammer together a little royalty-free something or other on my keyboard.
Right.
And it'll probably go something like this. And, it probably won't take long before I realize how bad that sucks. I might do another one. Or, who knows, I might book a musician on the show and convince him to do a thing for me. Who knows what's going to happen?
Just got to be original, or someone will come knocking at your door.
Oh, believe me, it's all going to be good, my friend. It's all going to be good. So listen,
thrilled, man.
I tell you what, let's wrap things up here for the episode 1 of Surf the World's Safest with my friend Dennis Mitchell. He's here, hanging out with me and helping to launch this endeavor, and we'll see where it goes. Okay, friends? So we'll catch up with you later.